Okay, thanks for joining us. It's Tuesday, September 15th, and today we're going to talk about Apple's live stream that they just presented, which was relatively short for Apple, which is great. They had it's scheduled 2 hours and only used an hour, which I much prefer. Um, and they kept it pretty concise, talking about Apple Watch and iPad. And I know those are two things that are not traditionally very business oriented, but they're pretty interesting. And I think it's the future of business. So I do want to talk a little bit about that when we get to that. I thought for starters, because Apple did a very Apple thing, their website now reflects pretty much their content. So let me open up my web browser and I'll go to apple.com and I'm going to share my screen. There we go. And of course, anyone can go back on the website, or I would often in the past watch it on Apple TV, watch the event. So this page, pretty much step by step, everything they talked about. I took some notes, Chad. I'm sure you have some notes, starting with the watch. Do you have an Apple Watch, Chad?
No, I don't.
Okay. I do. I've had one first generation, and then I think I skipped one or two, got the next generation, and now this will put me, I think, two generations behind. Um, I do rely on my watch quite a bit. I used to not wear a watch for years, and then of course Apple came out with one, so I had to get it, being the business that I'm in, and wasn't quite sure if I really needed it, but wanted to see what it could do. So I use it for workouts, and I use it for setting timers for myself, which is really huge because if I don't have a timer, I will miss a meeting. I'll just I'll just be focused and working and barrel right through something. So I set timers to remind myself, and feeling it on my wrist is is what I need to make stop me from doing whatever I'm doing. Have you thought about getting a watch, Chad, or do you know anyone who
N-
has them?
No, I don't have any desire, but it's come up in my mind for my son
Yeah.
because he trying to set him up to be as independent as possible with some of the school stuff, so I don't have to be there every 20 minutes or 25 minutes
Hmm.
to remind him. So he has an old phone. He has an old iPhone 5S that he's using, but he has to carry it in his pocket. And I thought,
Yeah.
well, it's tough for an 8-year-old to remember to put something in his pocket all the time, and so a watch might actually serve him well because he can, be stuck to his wrist. The trade-off for me is, it opens another can of worms, and for kids especially, that's kind of where I draw the line. So I mean, everyone's comfort level is going to be different.
Yeah.
It's a great device for for the right use case for sure.
Yeah, and I know. I think you're hinting at the health information that it collects.
A lot of
Um,
stuff. A
yeah,
lot of stuff.
and I don't know if you noticed, but Apple did mention the privacy features that they're known for, and how you control what you share and what you don't share, and how it's all done on device. So I know there are people who are probably skeptical of that, but um, the technology is there for them to do that. Now, whether they make a mistake or whether they're lying to us, or whether
That's the
uh,
well. I don't think it's that they're
any of this stuff
lying.
gets out.
Yeah, I think it's a lot to ask to put that work on us as consumers,
Hmm.
right? Configuring a watch or even a phone, any iOS device, um, takes work and intention.
Hmm.
And with someone who isn't even of legal age yet, I approach those cases a little bit differently. Now, if a teenager, college age kid who has a level of fluency and can you make the most of those privacy settings, that's awesome, right?
Yeah.
Um, but I think it really comes down to personal use case. I saw a lot of things that were really cool today.
Yeah, I mean, they did talk about family setup, and how you can, um, you know, like, a child doesn't need to have a phone with family setup. You control, like you said, what's shared and not shared.
Hmm.
Um,
I use that a lot. I mean, it's in heavy use here. And I think it's kind of a no-brainer to use some of the
Sorry,
family sharing features.
use what? Family sharing. Yeah. So family
Hmm.
sharing
Yeah,
has certainly been around for a while, but the new family setup for the watch is brand new. I don't know if you caught that during the presentation.
I
Um,
did. Yeah. Sorry, I
I was
used the
going to
wrong
mention just to finish out
angle.
how I use the Apple Watch. I use it to unlock the door to the office. Because it's got a little app. We're actually getting a new system in our building that will allow me to use the Apple Watch to unlock the front door to the building, which would be nice. Um, I do use it for workouts, appointment reminders, certainly the weather, the time, and I have one story about an increased heart rate. I do know one person who uh, had to go to the hospital, and he went early enough that it did save his life. This is a guy I met at a conference, or I've known for years through the Apple conference system,
I'm glad to
and
hear
he
that because I thought that was an urban myth. I've heard that in several different iterations, but since you met somebody, it's kind of nice to have confirmation of that not being
Yeah, he was kind of feeling. I mean, he could tell the story better, and I probably shouldn't even attempt it. But basically, he was feeling a little uneasy, and then the watch did alert him that his heart rate was elevated, and then it just kept going. Now, granted, without the watch, he might have figured that out on his own, but with the watch, he had a little more data, and he actually was
cool.
able to, in his words, go to the hospital and get like help. He felt more quickly because he had data to show them. It wasn't just like I feel kind of,
Sure.
this or that.
Right.
So he's a big proponent of that. And this has nothing to do with health, but I was sitting in a conference, not even a conference, a meeting of about 20 people, and unexpectedly they announced that they wanted us all to stand up one by one and introduce ourselves. So I'm comfortable talking in front of people, but it was just kind of thrown out there, and I was like
You
the
weren't
third,
given any notice.
wasn't given any notice, and when the person next to you is talking, at least for me, I tend to start thinking about what I'm going to say, and I don't even listen to them. I mean, I'm kind of half listening, but I'm also like, well, okay, what am I going to say? And as I'm going through this in my head, my watch goes beep beep beep, and I look, my heart rate was elevated. I was like,
Wow.
holy shit, excuse my language. But
Was
and then it was
surprising.
kind of like it was both like, okay, I know that. I didn't really need to know that right now, but
Sure.
but sure
What
enough,
happens? What's that experience like when that happens to you for those of us that aren't familiar? What does that
I
happen? Does
mean,
it
it
just buzz
basically just
on your wrist and
vibrates and says, FYI, your heart
you're going to
rate is
die if you don't
elevated. Yeah,
do something
yeah.
different?
So basically, at that point, because I was sitting there doing nothing, the watch was kind of like, "Hey, buddy, do you know your heart rate just went up?" And I had a good reason for it. It was because I was naturally like getting prepared for something I was feeling nervous about. So
Sure.
I just said, of course I know that, and brushed it off, and it did go down. And after I gave the 30-second introduction, I was fine. I actually mentioned it during the introduction, what had just happened to me. Um, so it offered a story for me at the time. But yeah, it was pretty interesting, and it was appropriate. I mean, there's no reason for my heart rate to go. I think it hit 100 just sitting there,
Sure.
and it was all
And that's
because of
drastic
of
because
just
at rest
being
you're fit. You're probably what 60, 65 at rest usually, maybe
between
lower.
60 and 70. Yeah,
Nice.
so somewhere
Yeah.
around there. So yeah, it was unusual, and good to know that it works. But
Yeah, that's pretty useful for, especially if I had a heart condition or if I
yeah,
had anything, even like anxiety, right? There's a lot of things that might make that more valuable to me. Um, yeah, that's a cool story.
yeah, and I'm interested in the additional heart functions, the VO2 max and the blood oxygen, but I don't really know what that means. And why do I need that? Do I need it? Will I need it as I get older? I think the
Yeah,
point is
you
this thing.
definitely. Well, I think so.
Yeah, these things are becoming medical devices in a way, for sure.
They are already. Yeah,
And
for sure.
as long as the insurance companies don't dictate what they, influence what they see from the Apple Watch, I'll be content with that. But where's that headed? We won't get into that today. But
Yeah. It's
I
always a
will.
trade-off, it's always a trade-off for some value, right? But they're already doing it with cars and GPS. Insurance companies are tracking people and charging them according to how many stop signs they didn't run this month or yellow lights they didn't roll through. And so there's always, that's kind of my angle. I'm always a little hesitant, but it's great. I mean, hopefully as, these tools become more mature, more of us are doing, are involved in telemedicine than ever before. And so
Right.
if we can, have an easy way to measure basic, really basic stats like that, it would really be helpful, because when the doctor calls and says, how tall are you? What do you weigh? What's your diastolic, blood pressure, all
Yeah.
this stuff. To take vitals from a device like that is pretty trivial, and it has a lot of value for everyone eventually. When you think,
Yeah. I mean, it seems like the more it can do to kind of just keep you up to date on your own personal health, I think it's important. I think, I mean, it's interesting to me. I think it could go. It's going to continue to get better.
yep,
And the health
definitely.
studies that they're doing, from everything I understand, prior to the Apple Watch, doing health studies, it was really hard. You had to go to the hospital for a period of time, or you had to take some clunky device home, and doctors had to trust that people would use it correctly and
Hmm.
consistently. But
Yep.
now the idea of having this just on there for those types of studies, I think is pretty incredible. Um, let's see, they talked about new watch faces, which, at first I thought, oh, whatever, I don't care about that. And then of course they're fantastic photography and
Yeah.
mesmerizing, presentation. I'm like, ooh, those look really cool. You know, I'm not sure the Memoji one. I'm like, do I need a Memoji of myself that I can look at?
Sure you do.
Is that
Everybody.
for the me generation?
That's why they're
They
buying
want
them, man. That's
they
the
want to
selling
see
point right
themselves.
there. They don't care about vitals and all that crap. It's like,
Yeah.
how good is a camera?
I mean, the video shots, the up close video shots, they made it look like a spaceship, right? Like coming out of the sky with the red lights and everything. And it's like Apple Watch porn. You just look at this stuff and you're like, oh my God, this is
They are.
incredible.
It is. It really
Um,
is. I mean, the chip. I was really fascinated by some of the discussions. I guess that wasn't really watch related, but just how the general tech. And just in terms of thickness.
mhm.
What they used to be able to fit in the watch is different than what they can fit in it today, and just size. Everything's going small and smaller and smaller. It's really remarkable to
Yeah.
see when they lined them all up, and you could see, it was 7 nanometers and all the things that came with that thickness, and how size and thickness and that. It was just that was probably my favorite slide, was that one that showed all the different chips, over time. I mean, that's a lot of work to look at it that way.
Yeah. And the specs are always interesting to me, but I have to look at them later and kind of digest them. Like it's just always the same old faster, better, stronger.
40%, yeah, more or
Yeah.
less across the
Like
board on all of
whatever.
these things. But that's the law, that's the science behind it. It's really
Yeah.
interesting to see. I think the most impressive thing for me personally was how powerful these tablets are now.
Hmm.
I mean, it's really like the desktop market is breathing its last. I mean, we've been saying that, but I think that they really are breathing their last gasps now, because you can really not be limited. Um,
Yeah.
they've improved that platform so much, and I mean, I couldn't believe the innovative things, like the guy who was doing the DJ mixing with his hands in the air,
Oh
and he
yeah.
just had
Yeah.
one little device there, and he was doing all that stuff, and of course the gaming engines and things. And then who was the third guy who was doing something?
Well, I want to
um,
I want to get to that, but
sorry,
let's
I'm not
close
even
out the watch
staying
face.
on
We'll
track. Yeah.
go. I'm going to go in chronological
So
order here.
exciting. Right on. That sounds
And
good.
I just want to wrap up the watches by saying the bands, interesting about the bands. But I wanted them to say, and when you put it on, it just kind of like adjusts its size automatically to your wrist. But it looks like that's not really the case. You have to find one that you can small enough, big enough to fit over your hand, but small enough to like. I'm sure there's some stretch in it.
What
But
kind of
did you
band do
see
you
that?
use?
Well, I use a band that's got holes in it, but you saw in the video
Yeah,
these
yeah,
new
yeah,
bands, they're just a loop,
yeah,
and so they showed in one photo there was like at least 10 to 20 different sizes.
yeah.
So I imagine you got to go to the store and try them all on to figure out which one you like. And
Unless the sizing
that's
chart is really accurate, people can just measure.
maybe,
I don't know. I mean, but that's kind of that's always been part of Apple's MO, right? Is that in person retail experience, and that COVID doesn't seem to have
yeah.
stalled that at all. Because you're right, you would have to go into the store and tinker around, and
Well, I'm sure they didn't. I'm sure they've been working on this long before COVID. But
for sure.
anyway, so let's see. So the family setup. That's when they then talked about the family setup and school time mode sounds like a great idea. We tried to simulate that for our son,
Same.
uh, and I don't know. That's a step. It's a step in the right direction, I think.
I do too.
We I still know people who think that their Apple devices aren't working properly when they suddenly can't track their kid. They're like, yeah, it's just not very consistent. It's like, no, I think it's pretty consistent. I think your kid's just turning it off. So, uh, so I don't know. In this particular setup, I imagine the child does not have the ability with just the watch to turn off the tracking. Yeah,
That's what it sounds like. Yeah,
yeah,
and
but they'll
that's
figure it
more.
out. They'll figure out a way around
Hopefully,
it.
hopefully. I
Yeah.
mean, guided access mode. Um, I remember the first time one of the kids around here defeated that. And
Yeah.
so it's constantly the mice get smarter, the traps get better. But I
Yeah.
like this direction because it would be nice to not have to, like right now. We use Jamf to manage all these devices in the house because there isn't another solution. It would be nice to have something
Hmm.
friendly for a family to be able to
Hmm.
not have to have a lot of fluency to manage that
Yeah.
stuff. It'd be really great. So
Yeah. Are you using Jamf now to manage your home stuff or?
yes,
Oh,
yeah,
okay.
exactly.
Yeah.
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 But first we use configurator, of course. So
Yeah.
we go through that whole mess. And that's why I think this is a really huge improvement because, it's fine for folks like you and I that can,
Yeah.
do that pretty quickly, but it's still overhead. It would be nice to have that built in to the back end
Yeah.
already, like family sharing, right?
Yeah. Yeah. If anyone's not using family sharing, you gotta do it. I mean,
It's
nobody should be
awesome. Yeah.
sharing a single family Apple ID like I did many years ago. Everyone in the family get a free Apple ID. Use family
Hmm.
sharing. Works really well. And then this family setup, both for young and for grandparents or older people who maybe don't have a phone. That's a good idea. I mean, I could see definitely, as my parents get older, that fall detection, the heart rate, all the stuff built in to help an older person um, get help when they need it, right? I mean, that just makes sense. And my dad has a flip phone. I don't want him to have to get an iPhone in order to get an Apple Watch. And I'm sure he doesn't want to hear me say that I want him to wear an Apple Watch. He probably won't, you know. But
Do you use your phone? Here's a question for you, and this is
yeah.
going to show you my level of ignorance. Um, do you use your phone less with a watch, or do you use your phone about the same? Like, because the screen on the phone's really small, right? So I'm probably not going to be reading much of anything on my watch. I'm still going to use
Yeah.
my phone, right? Or what's it like for you?
I think it definitely cuts down on the need to look at the phone, especially if in a situation where you're getting text, like group text or family text or just any type of alerts. Before the watch, if I got an alert, I would have to look at the phone face to see what it was about.
Mhm.
With the watch, I just look at it, and then, of course, there are still situations where it prompts me to pull the phone out because, to your point, it's either a long read or it's a photo or it's something else I need to do. Um, but it could just be
Oh,
as simple
photos. I hadn't
as,
thought of that. Probably
yeah,
hard
it's,
to
oh
look at
yeah,
big photos. Huh?
that's interesting. I'll look at that later, or I don't need to reply to that, or I'll reply, on my way, or thank you, or got it. Just little things from the watch. Um, so the watch can also be a remote control if you want to take a family selfie, like put the camera down and then everyone steps back and you take a photo. So it does some neat stuff with the phone. And I think there are lots of things that you could use it for that I don't use it for. Um, and I, like occasionally I'll take a phone call on it, but that's not the best experience. Despite the fact that I think Apple did a demo of somebody out in the middle of a lake, when they first previewed the ability to do that.
Yeah, I remember that.
It's not. I mean, if I had my AirPods, which I have on now, it would probably be a better experience. But yeah, all this is still coming together nicely. I mean, as kids, can you imagine seeing this as a kid? Like,
No.
holy cow!
No.
No way! Like, incredible.
Especially, I mean, are we moving on to the tablets? Because man, that was exactly how it made me feel. I was sitting there like, imagine being 12 and watching this cat mix music with his hands in the air.
Yeah, I know. We want to get to that, Chad. We want to get
Sorry.
First, we got to get past. Well, first they talked about their carbon footprint, which I hope they get there. They have got 10 years to get 100% carbon neutral. I thought it was interesting that they said they're no longer shipping USB power adapters with the Apple Watch, and I'm sure they needed to say why they're not doing that because people will complain.
Sure.
But it's a good point. Like, how many of these little USB wall warts do I have lying around? Like, totally. I don't need them. I do. This is a total not related, but I do wish Apple got rid of the cords, the rubber coated cords, and did a cloth cord.
Yes.
Because the cloth cords you can buy online are so much nicer and seems to fit the Apple quality aesthetic much better than these plastic cords. But anyway,
that's a really good point, and they hold up longer.
Yeah. So Fitness Plus, I doubt I will do anything with this.
Kid fires with this. What's Fitness Plus about?
So Fitness Plus is a fitness service that Apple is releasing. It's kind of like online fitness videos.
Gotcha.
That new ones coming every week, and you can watch them. And when you watch them, you actually see your watch stats up on the screen, and which is interesting because there are sometimes when you're working out, if you want to check your heart rate, it's a little awkward, I guess, to look at your watch when you could just look straight ahead at a screen. At first, I thought, wow, this is what timing? Like everyone's now must work from home. Did they actually roll this out like early COVID, or knowing Apple, they've been working on this for a while? But they actually did mention at one point that you could use this at the gym. So I think it's more about an enhancement to any workout, whether it's at home or at the gym or wherever. I don't think it was specific to COVID, but certainly timing is good. The only thing I personally don't like about it, and I don't really can't put my finger on it, but it looks a little Disney-esque. Like, do you remember those? Like, I love Disney, but the TV shows Disney creates are so like obnoxious and saccharine, and just everyone's having a good old time.
Totally.
And I look at these they're highly produced, nearly perfect, I'm sure, exercise videos. And I don't know, it's just like Christine, my wife, and I, we work out. We've been working out with someone we know here in town doing live streams. And that's pretty cool. Like we know them. They're here in town. We still feel like we're part of a community. This just feels a little cold. And it reminded me, did you know Apple did this for GarageBand? They were doing they did some videos and like how to learn how to play guitar. I think they had Sting and some others doing these videos. I remember
that. Yeah, that was like when they still called it, when it was like what was it, the iLife suite? Wasn't it back in those days?
Maybe. Yeah.
Or it was shortly after that, maybe. But I remember that being really cool. And a couple of friends and I actually tried that, and for a few months we sent tracks back and forth and adding live instruments and line in kind of stuff, and it was really, really, really cool. And now it seems like there's that pieces. In fact, I just had this conversation with a friend of mine who's a musician last week, and he said that that's what they're doing. Like, these musicians and artists are creating these habitats online, right, using whatever piecemeal together. But it seems like there's a huge opportunity there to create some kind of a really accessible, like say you want to have a a concert in your house, and you could live stream it on a big display and do things and help support live music that way. It just seems like they're doing it with fitness. They're doing it with all these other contexts too. I imagine we're going to see more of this mixed reality, and I mean I can kind of see a hints of it here in this device. I could see where there's room to grow into that. And I'm not going to go start talking about LiDAR and iPads. I promise. I'm not skipping this.
Yeah. Okay. Good. Yeah. So I mean, knowing Apple, I'm sure they'll be successful with this. I'm not sure I will participate in it or want to or need to.
It's cool though. It's nice
But
that it's
yeah,
there.
it's interesting, and I'm sure they've gotten to the point now where they can obviously do this stuff and highly produce it, and it looks great. I mean, talking
Sure
about
does.
producing, even their presentation, which those video segues from real life to and were those recorded yesterday? Were they really live? I don't know.
They
But
were probably last couple of
it
days.
was still pretty cool.
It
Pretty
was.
amazing.
I mean, it was really, since Steve left us and that whole scene has changed. I have to say, I really enjoyed this. This felt like their own thing. It didn't feel like trying to live up to something else. It felt like, I don't know. I really enjoyed it.
So yes, after the Fitness Plus, they talked about, well, wait, not yet. Apparently they don't have it up here. Here they talked about Apple One. So this is a bit out of order from what they talked about. Apple One.
That's okay.
And I haven't looked at the services. I personally use iCloud. I use Music, and I use TV Plus. I don't use Arcade. I tried News Plus, and it is just too much. Like I'm trying to focus what I look at and not read more. I couldn't. It was too much. And then now they have Fitness Plus. So I don't know if it would make sense for me to subscribe to any of these with family sharing. Maybe not. But now my kids are getting older, so maybe not.
Arcade is rad. I mean, I don't know if you've had any experience with it, but like, what was the one our kids were in? The Sneaky Sasquatch. That game is rad. It is kind of the epitome of all of the your favorite. It kind of has Castle Wolfenstein in it, a little bit of that, a little bit of like King's Quest, but of course the graphics and the whole story and the kinds of things that you can do in the game are very a diverse bunch of things that you can do. But the arcade, and there's a handful of Apple Arcade games. That's the only one I really, besides Apple TV, that I have experience with.
Yeah, I mean, what we have today is the type of stuff that I remember even when my kids were younger, I wanted, because we had like no cable, or the cable we had was just terrible. And I remember thinking, why can't I just buy I just want to watch a show. I just want to buy that one show,
Sure.
And now you can do that. You can buy that one show. But yeah, I mean, once again, these are great products. I don't use them all, nor do I have time to use them all. But you use Arcade, it sounds like.
I don't. They did for a while. I mean, it hasn't really. There was just a town update to Sneaky Sasquatch, and that rekindled the flame for a bit. But it's like you said, man. They've got access to all kinds of schwack already, and sometimes I don't know. Sometimes I feel like timing is, it has a lot to do with it. If the timing is right or the timing is not. Like right now is a good time with all the epic Apple stuff going on, for somebody to come in and maybe capitalize on that arcade. But they need titles, and that Sneaky Sasquatch was one. But I don't think they've been using it much.
Yeah.
Since that. No.
Well, and once again, these really are individual and family oriented. They're not business, although I could certainly see businesses. I mean, businesses do take advantage of Apple TVs in the conference rooms when we were in the office, when we had conference rooms. I'm sure eventually we'll get back to that. And iCloud is starting to bleed over a little bit into the workplace, especially for collaboration, mostly on keynotes where we see it. But in addition to iCloud, you can also collaborate in Box. Box.com does keynote collaboration. So I don't know, if we were in the news business, I'm sure we'd be more interested in news. Or in the medical or health area, maybe around fitness.
You looked at it though, right? What was your impression?
Yeah,
you said it was a little overwhelming.
it was, it was early in COVID where it was the whole family was home and we were all kind of like, you know, not doing anything, so to speak.
Right. Right.
And there was an option for a 30-day trial. So I did it for a while, and it is nice because you can pretty much read anything as opposed to you see a headline, you want to read it, and it's like this is News Plus
Paywalled or
subscribers
something.
only,
Oh, sure.
yeah.
Sure.
But at the end of the day, I just found myself spending way too much time on it, and I'm like, I don't need to do this, so I need to
Is it
cut back.
pinboardy? I mean, what's the interface like? Did they kind of model it after that interface?
You can certainly decide what you like and what you want to subscribe to, and not just news but magazines as well. I mean,
Hmm.
truly for me, it was just overwhelming. I would have to probably spend a month just discovering it, and then I spent
Yeah.
another month narrowing it down to just what I want to focus on, and even then limiting the amount of time I spend because I
Hmm.
mean the content is it's a
Totally a lot.
lot.
Yeah.
Yeah,
That's the
and
downside. I think that's what keeps me from using them. You just nailed it.
yeah. And to be honest with you, I have not figured out personally how to really balance that. Like I try to limit my time in the morning, and I'll sometimes do a little bit in the evening. But if I'm not careful, as I'm sure this happens to anyone, I see people on Facebook or Instagram like that's their life, and I think it was this past weekend because it was rainy on Saturday. I just kind of like browsed Apple News for a while, and a while I think turned into a few hours. And it was like,
Sure.
do you remember those days as a kid where you just like watch TV all afternoon, then you kind of like,
Yeah.
oh my god, I feel kind of sick.
Yeah, you have
Yeah,
that like film that it feels like a rubber clown suit, like of
yeah,
malaise. Yeah, totally remember
yeah.
that.
So I kind of felt like that. Like, what am I doing now? Now I'm like, there's no. I was just flipping through the channels of Apple News, basically the free version. Um,
Oh, so even the free version is just like
oh, even the free version, you can
untenable.
go down a rabbit hole of information, and occasionally I remember reading this one story. I'm like, this wasn't even a story. This is just like clickbait to get me to read the story that wasn't
Uh,
really a story. And
man,
that
it's
was
so
National
exhausting.
Geographic. So I was, anyway, enough
Mm.
about that. Enough about that. Let's get to the iPads, Chad.
Should we talk about the iPads, Ben? All right.
Yeah.
I
So,
was so totally impressed with this. Sitting in my 12-year-old shoes, trying to remind myself like there are
oh
12-year-olds
man.
watching this, like you said, like my head would explode into confetti. I was so impressed with that. That was by far the coolest thing that I caught. I had to step away a couple times because of kids, but yeah, it was really. It just was simple. It wasn't overly hyped. It didn't feel like they were, sometimes it gets kind of muscled, and this
Hmm.
didn't. It just didn't feel like that at all. I had a really clean to be able to do some of those things. They're really behind the scenes. It's important to maybe mention, the extended reality, the mixed reality technologies are slowly, there isn't going to be a killer app
Hmm.
for that stuff, right? It's kind of like the iPhone. It just showed up and suddenly
Yeah.
people started using it and there was a new reality overnight. And MR, XR, these AR, VR, integrations are it's just going to happen,
So
right? And the
MR,
iPad,
what do you mean?
uh,
Multi-reality or what?
mixed reality, yeah,
Mixed reality?
MR, yeah, mixed reality. And so we have AR,
Hmm.
augmented reality, right, which is laying kind of virtual interfaces over reality. We have virtual reality, of course, which is super immersive, great for entertainment and gaming and stuff like that. But there's not a lot of practical applications for VR outside of entertainment. Maybe some design, maybe some stuff, in the medical research field, manufacturing. But from a consumer perspective, it's kind of like one or the other. It's like it's either all on, you're all in, or you're kind of the AR. And AR has kind of gone industrial. Apple has seems to be taking this in a really interesting direction with some of the patents they filed in the last few months.
Hmm.
And what I see from the iPad, its lidar capabilities to be able to scan a room and do all these things, and the tennis court example that they had
Yeah.
in this presentation, for example, it's I would not be able to contain. I would be dragging my parent to the Apple store right now,
Yeah. Yeah.
to be able to tinker with this stuff because it is pretty rad. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And you mentioned the DJ. I mean,
Yeah.
controlling an app from above
Mm-hmm.
without touching it,
Yeah.
what's going to
And
happen next with that?
that was all pioneered. I'm trying to remember her name, Imogen Heap. I mean, she pioneered a lot of that interface, 15 years ago. And it's wild to see this go consumer, right?
Yeah.
To see the work of a few artists, a few people that was so bleeding edge, it seems like yesterday is now like really, it's going to be accessible to anybody.
And there's also the photos where you zoom enhance,
Yeah,
and those
that's far up.
tools have been around and for a while. But to think that the processing power is
Yeah.
built into this little thin piece of hardware is pretty amazing. This is one area where I think the business world is slow to adopt, but they're going to
Hmm.
get there. I certainly have heard, we don't do a lot of healthcare work directly in hospitals, but I know hospitals, these are pretty popular devices. I
Yep.
mean,
Yep.
why wouldn't they be? They're so easy to carry around and punch
Yep.
things in and take photos and do things with.
Easy to keep
Um,
clean, so that's a
yeah,
concern too.
they do have to be protected. There are they have to be managed properly and secured properly. And I know I've heard horror stories of that not happening as well.
Yeah.
But
Well, it's
as
tricky
far as
because they've always been single user devices, which can work for us and also
Mhm,
against us, right? We've talked about this
mhm,
with Apple IDs and stuff.
yeah.
If someone you were probably going somewhere in that direction, maybe.
Well, you're right. In fact, I remember when the iPad was previewed, they actually showed a multi-user login, like
I
the
remember
original
that. Yeah.
iPad 10 years ago. And
Hmm.
there was even
Yeah.
an article. Sorry, I have something in my eye. There was even an article. It was like Mac Tech Magazine or some. There was some magazine. Can't remember the name of it. It wasn't Mac Tech. That's something else. There's some magazine that even had like screenshots of it. But when it actually came out, because I think there was a time period between it was when it was previewed and when it was shipping. That was not there, never has been there until recently. You can now have with a managed iPad, a supervised iPad, you can have multi users, and it's meant for classrooms, and I believe it's meant for hospitals. And I suppose if you have a business use case at work, you could do the same thing.
Sure.
But for a family, that's still not, as far as I'm aware, not an easy thing for a family to do. And that was one of the things
Hmm.
that frustrated me. It's like I wanted this to
Same
sit in the family room, and any family member could go use it, but with their own controls,
stuff. Yeah.
not my stuff, or not
Yeah.
my son's stuff. So I think Apple's slowly getting there. I think a lot of people certainly could argue the fact that they're taking their time getting there because they want to sell more iPads.
Yeah.
I
Well, they
mean,
don't want. I mean, it doesn't make any sense for them. They've tried to go after the enterprise market how many times?
yeah,
Um, and it's never really been. I don't know what you would describe it as successful. I don't think I would. I think there were elements of it that were, and now it seems like their approach seems to be the individual, and I think that makes more sense because then an individual can determine, you know, if they want to go through the steps, or if an IT department, for example, wants to go through the steps to, they have enough people asking for Apple devices within a Windows culture, for example.
yeah,
That's easier than it's ever been. I mean, I remember the days of Casper and integrating, binding stuff to AD, and oh my God, it was just, we spent probably most of our time just fixing really basic stuff that just broke all the time. So
yeah.
now it's come a long way, and to be able to, I think the single user mode to device was probably a good call back then, because now we're starting to see zero trust architectures and things that we're not even
Hmm,
using passwords anymore, right?
hmm.
Passwords are going to go away here in a year or two, and we're starting to see that already. And with iPads, I don't remember the last time I typed in a password on an iOS device. They're super friendlier to
Yeah.
use than they've ever been.
So I noticed I have a first generation iPad Pro,
Wow.
11-inch, or is it second generation? I get these confused sometimes, but
Is that your
basically
main that's your main iPad that you use? I see.
it is, and I watch the presentation on that iPad, which has a great screen, and the presentation from Apple looked great on it. But
Sure.
the form, I was looking at the specs. They don't sell the one I have anymore, but the specs of what I have and this iPad are nearly identical. So the old
Mm.
iPad Pro 11-inch. I think it's actually second gen.
Just the chip that's different.
It's I mean, there are some slight subtle differences if you go to iPad and compare. So if I go to this new iPad Air, and if I go to here, I had a first generation iPad Pro 11.
What year did that come out? Was that like 3 years ago, 2 years ago? Or 3 years ago?
I can't remember.
Pretty recent though, right? It wasn't that long ago. It doesn't seem
No, it wasn't that long ago. So yeah, this is the one I have. So, if you scroll down here,
you've got a whole T of storage on that thing.
Well, you can get up to. I don't have quite that much.
Gotcha.
I don't know what I have, but they're almost identical. They're a little bit, 7.02 inches versus 7 inches.
The case is different.
Yeah, so there are a few things missing, like this ProMotion technology. This is where I get a little frustrated with Apple. It's like, why do we have to have so many options? Like, why this iPad Pro, iPad Air, and then we've got just the regular old iPad. It just seems like it's a little confusing. Here we go. We got the iPad Pro, iPad Air, iPad Mini. Got a lot of options. Like, trying to decide what your use case is not as straightforward as whether you want a desktop or a laptop, and then kind of narrowing it down from there. And it makes sense that the iPad Air is. I just don't even know why they have the iPad Air. Just have the iPad, iPad Pro, and iPad Mini. Like, I don't understand where the Air fits in.
For mountain climbers who want to carry the very lightest
Yeah, I don't know.
Up the side of K2.
But did you catch that they mentioned the iPad, not even the Air, just the iPad, which if we go back here, iPad, at least this is what I understood, starting at $329, they're saying that these specs of this iPad were up to 7 times more powerful than the top seller books. They went through a series of, more powerful than X, Y, and Z, and even the Chromebooks, which I know the Chromes are pretty weak when it comes to power. They're very inexpensive. And that's why a lot of people are drawn to them. But this is where I think people, like today, if I needed to get somebody onboarded, like an office worker, and if I needed them to be mobile, the MacBook Air is the default entry level product. But the iPad is coming very close to replacing that, in my opinion, because it's cheaper, it's lighter, it's faster. I mean, faster in some ways. Even thought about this for my son who went to college, but he ended up taking an old MacBook Air rather than anything new. There's still some things that are a little rough with the iPad, but ever since they made the iPad OS and they made Safari the same on the iPad as it is on the Mac, there's very little I can't do on the iPad.
Sure, because everything's browser-based.
Yeah, right. I still tend to work faster and spend most of my time on MacBook Pro with the big displays, but even they didn't talk about this iPad, but my iPad Pro can connect to a large display. It has a keyboard. It now has a trackpad.
And you can hook it up to a big display if you want.
Yeah, right. So like during the work week when I'm here in the office, I will use my MacBook Pro. But when I go away for the weekend or want to leave the office or even just sit on the couch, I'll take my iPad. And it's almost getting to a point where, do I even need a MacBook Pro anymore? Should I just get an iMac? You get more power for the bucks.
I'm starting to feel that way too.
More bang for the bucks. And then I'll use my iPad, want to be mobile.
It makes a lot of sense. And it's also, I think that from a, perspective of managing devices, it's always been challenging because it used to be every one person had one device. Now, there's 6 people in this house, and there's, I think, between the people, there's like 37 devices or something, and that's not even including like network architecture and like all the stuff that's powering everything. And that's that changes the way that we have to think about this stuff, right? So when someone says, hey, I would rather have an iPad than a laptop, someone like me who thinks about, resilience and security and compliance and stuff like that, I love that because it's really hard for someone to, I mean, if you have kids, right? But generally, there's something about iPads that I would never ask to use your iPad. Like that's a really personal, I don't know. Do
Mm-hmm.
you get asked, does anybody ever ask you to use your iPad?
Yeah, no.
No, see, I like that. It's like it's a personal. It's not like laptops where you don't really know who's using it all the time and can't be sure. But iPads, for some reason, just culturally have evolved that way, and I think that's really cool because even if you have a situation where everyone in your organization has 2 or 3 devices, I think the overall, just threat model is different because of the way people tend to use them. They're just very personal, and that's good. I mean, it can be really good.
I stand corrected. My wife has on occasion said, "Hey, can I borrow your iPad?" And my natural reaction is, "Why?" And she's like, "Oh, because
Don't
mine's
you
in the
have
other
your own?
room.
Yeah,
Because mine's in the other room." I'm like,
sure.
just go get yours. Like, I don't feel comfortable giving you my iPad. Which I don't even know why.
I know. I don't know either, but it has maintained that, and that's pretty cool. Even kids, like, I hear, my little guy, he's using a Chromebook for school, and he's gotten used to it pretty quickly. But the first few days, it was like, oh, I just wish this was an iPad, right?
Yeah.
From the mouths of babes, and I think there's a lot to be said for just the simplicity of it. And when I look at him doing his schoolwork and stuff on a Chromebook, and yeah, they're not awesome. They're terrible for streaming or video conference. They're horrible, right? It was a wrong tool. When districts chose those, it's definitely cost, driven. But they're just horrible you can't hear anything very well. And just the whole experience is it's just a very different thing. And even a kid, a little, 8-year-old, he's not little, but he's 8. He knows the difference in quality. And it matters to
Yeah.
him.
Well, and that's because he's experienced an iPad, right?
Right,
I mean,
and
if he
that's not
didn't have
everybody.
anything, a Chromebook would be fantastic. If he didn't have anything, but because he
Sure,
experienced an iPad, yeah, it's
it
like,
kind of spoils
really,
them.
I got to
Yeah,
use this.
hmm
Use this.
and that's
So
the challenge. Yeah.
what's interesting is I haven't really. I feel like I'm just now coming to this conclusion, which is over the past several years, I've seen businesses move away from desktops and go nearly all notebooks
hmm
because they are more they are more affordable than they used to be, but they're certainly more affordable. The hard drive space is there, the power is there. Everyone wants one, but
hmm
here I am thinking we're now at the point because of these iPads that my next computer at work might be an iMac, and
hmm
then my portable
Or
will be
many.
my iPad.
Yeah,
Yeah, or I mean, could be
I
a
could
mini.
totally, I could totally get with that. Yeah, it's like the home matters now. Now it's like the office. It seems like I've had clients saying this to me for years, where I work at home, I work at the office. Why would I treat them differently? And I think that's starting to catch up with, regular, everyday folks like us, because what you just said, it's like if you had a choice, and it seems like a lot of places, whatever size and level of complexity they are, they're giving people a choice more than ever now. They're
Hmm.
saying, if you want, a PC, that's cool. We'll give you a Windows 10 device, but the surfaces are really nice. I've used them. They're comparable in some ways, but they're totally different in other ways. And I think the tablet is great because it is single user. It's portable. Man, the battery life. I mean, I don't have to
Oh, it's
worry about
amazing.
plugging. MacBook Pro. These things they don't, maybe an hour and 15
Hmm.
minutes or something like that. That's not enough to really be portable. It's not really a portable device because it has to be plugged in, right?
Hmm. Yeah. Okay. Well, that's we'll see what happens with
Yeah.
businesses. It'll probably take a while. We'll float the idea out there, and everyone will
hmm
probably say, "Oh no, it's a bad idea." But eventually, I think that's what's going to happen. It's like
Yep.
especially if more people are working from home and only occasionally going into the office. Like, well, I'll keep my iMac at home, my work machine, and then I'll go into office with my iPad,
Yep.
possibly, and have my meetings and do almost everything I can do on my
The only
iPad.
thing here's a silly question. I presume you can plug a hub into the USB-C port on your iPad. A hub.
Hmm.
and run HDMI. Can you run Ethernet though? Is there a NIC on the iPad? Can you run your iPad over
I
Ethernet?
don't know. I don't know. I mean, the iPad's certainly all about, wireless
Wireless. Yeah.
connectivity.
Yeah.
Um, but once again, there's certain things, like, I don't know, if you're a hardcore video editor day in and day out, you don't want to work off an iPad or even a notebook, right? You
Hmm.
want to go sit down at a really powerful machine with
Yeah.
fast storage and fast network and do all your stuff. But
We have had situations, since we've been in, the pandemic era, where folks their wireless is flaky, and
yeah,
we've had a handful of folks have said, "Oh, I'm gonna plug into Ethernet or whatever." That wouldn't be possible with an iPad. Maybe that wouldn't be an
yeah,
option. So that's a
yeah.
limitation.
And that's where it's still early days for that becoming a full-on computer. Um,
Yeah, it's
that's
so
another thing
close
Apple
though.
does with those videos. They make it look so slick. Like you just pick it up, you grab your pencil, you make your notes. It works great every time. And we know in reality, it's not quite that smooth.
Yeah, not
uh,
really. When it works, it's great.
yeah, yeah, and a lot of it does work. It's just
Most of the
I
time.
don't think our brains are that smooth. We just can't like transition like that.
Mm-mm.
Um,
It is
so
by far the friendliest format, though. I mean, I have to say, there's so many things about tablets that are capable of things that other form factors aren't, right? And in the context of social, right? If you
mhm,
see people hanging out, friends, family, whatever, on iPads, for some reason, it's not a closed off
mm,
like laptop world, right? The laptop world was like we might as well have been under a blanket, you know.
yeah,
And the iPads are just like they're so much more social. Even kids, like kids are just so much more accessible to each other when on these devices. And I remember being so refreshed by the possibility of that. And I think it has really made computing much more, you know,
yeah.
interactive with other people than, even when you're sharing articles with your wife or at home, like, here, read this. And there's an element to it that's human more than some other devices, maybe.
Yeah, that's a good point. This past weekend, when I said I basically binge read Apple News, I was sitting in a room with other people. And you're right, because I wasn't sitting there with my laptop, no one
Yeah.
assumed I was working or doing, I was still approachable and they could, interrupt me at any time and we would have conversations. It was almost like I was just in there reading a newspaper or a
Hmm.
magazine, right?
That's cool.
Versus
That's
sitting
cool.
at a computer.
Right.
So yeah, it's a good point. I mean, there was a time where I had my iPad and I felt a little guilty because I'm like, this costs a lot of money. I don't use it
Sure.
very often. I'm
They
still
weren't
trying to,
that practical. Yeah, they
yeah,
really
I'm
there
still
was
trying
it
to
was a
figure
consumer,
out.
cool for watching, consuming content and stuff like that. But it was hard to make things on it. I remember when I made my first movie, I challenged myself. I went to Costa Rica and I thought I'm not going to take like my Canon 5D Mark II and all this crap. I
Hmm.
just want to take an iPad and a phone and I'm going to do everything on this iPad. And it
Yeah.
wasn't easy, um, but it was totally doable. This would have been like 2012, I guess. And I was able to do that. And on the way home on the plane, I edited the whole week or two, whatever vacation on the iPad. And it was the first time I ever
Hmm.
did it all, audio and video and everything. So, I mean, it's come a long way. I just, the limitation of, some of the functionality is probably just going to keep growing. Those limitations are going to
Yeah.
keep going away.
Yeah. So today I use my iPad quite a bit. So
You do.
um,
Yeah. You don't even bring,
actually,
I don't think I've ever seen you bring a laptop to when we used to have meetings, and
yeah.
it seems like yesterday. I don't remember you ever bringing a laptop. It was always, I think, your iPad.
Yeah, that was kind of what I was doing when we had meetings. The only time I would bring my notebook was if I knew I needed to do something more advanced troubleshooting, like work related, like you said, plugging in, type
Hmm.
stuff.
Yeah.
Um, so yeah, I still, if I, like I said, if I want to get work done quickly, I still tend to do it on my computer with the big screen. But when forced to, especially for reading or responding to emails, and lots of other things, I'm sure, photography or editing photos, all that stuff. iPad's great. So that's pretty much everything they talked about. There was they did mention tomorrow we're going to see iOS 14, iPad OS 14, Watch iOS 7, and TV OS 14. I love my Apple TV. I use it
Yeah,
to
it's great.
exclusively. I don't have any other
Same,
service. Yeah.
same. Yeah.
Um,
It's that by far, it's less about me being an Apple fanboy than just a system that's super easy to use. The
mhm,
only drag, I mean, if I had to complain, it's that it's such a closed system, right? So it lives outside the rest of the ecosystem in my
mhm,
network, right? So there's kind of this, enterprise kind of, VLANs and ubiquity, all that crap. And instead of trying to integrate that into it, it was really hard. And so I had to kind of segregate the Apple stuff. So if you're doing everything the Apple way, it works great. But if you're not, it takes a little bit, even for someone like us, that we have a lot of fluency, to kind of figure that out. Because I thought maybe I'll just integrate it, but no, it's kind of like a separate thing. But it's worth it, is my point, because it is so friendly, it is so reliable, and it's
yeah.
just intuitive for anybody to use. I mean, there's a lot of other great systems out there, but I don't know. I think it's pretty
Yeah,
easy to use.
and I can certainly complain about the Apple TV. I don't like the remote. They put
Yeah,
stuff backwards with that in the dark. You
I
can't figure
agree.
out which way it is, what direction
That's
you're
true.
holding it.
That's
Um,
true. Need a
and
textured surface or something.
yeah, and some of the interface choices they made or they allowed their app developers to make are just frustrating and confusing.
Passwords and user management
Um,
has some work to do for
yeah,
sure.
but the for the most part, for what it does really well. And a friend of mine just got a new TV, a Samsung TV, and they had Apple TV Plus embedded in the TV. I was surprised. Um, so that's obviously a service that they're trying to get, out
Mm-hmm.
there.
Right.
It also had AirPlay built into it, into the Samsung TV. So that was interesting. I mean, it still sometimes feels like Apple TV is a bit of a hobby for Apple,
It does.
and then Apple TV Plus, showing a lot of promise, but still not a lot of content. Not especially not compared to Disney. I mean, Disney's got tons of content.
Yeah,
Um,
and the interface is really, I have to say, they've done a nice job with the UI. You know,
yeah,
HBO
but oh,
too. I mean, I like HBO is nice. I mean, there's some really nice integrations there. But being able to watch Amazon, I mean, there's a lot of things that we weren't able to
mhm,
do. I
mhm.
remember streaming AirPlay off of a phone to
Oh
to
yeah,
an Apple TV to watch Amazon movies. Did you ever do that? It
yeah,
was
yeah,
it was a delay, but it didn't matter. It was like whatever, and occasionally the thing would ring or go to sleep. You'd have to start the set it all up again. So it's really come a long way, man. And I don't know what I would do without it. It is like the go-to family entertainment system.
yeah, and it's still a little confusing here. I mean, look, Apple TV HD, Apple TV 4K. You got to make a decision. Then
What's
they got the
so
Apple
HD
TV
is just
app.
1080p,
I think that's the old version. I'm not even sure
versus
which is new and
21
which
or
is old.
whatever it is,
Then you've got
4K.
your Apple TV Plus service. So yeah, and then you've got AirPlay. I mean, it's great to have options. It's great that these things work fantastic in the boardroom and the conference rooms. Before COVID, we were seeing almost every boardroom was having these. And I think we had one client who said, well, I just learned, like I said, my friend bought a TV, Apple AirPlay's built in, so we don't need the Apple TV. Well, the experience is still not quite the same.
Yeah.
So uh, the Apple TV, Apple does do a nice job with their ecosystem. And I want to watch this Long Way Up, this one here, with Ian McGregor. But anyway, we're at our hour, Chad. Thanks for joining me to
Yeah,
rehash this.
for sure.
And so,
And
are you gonna
next
buy
up,
anything? You gonna
the
buy
new.
anything?
No, I don't think so. I'm going to hang out. I still have an iPhone 8.
Yeah.
I'm not really hot to trot on buying the latest greatest. I like stuff that works, and I have to have a reason to upgrade. And if
Hmm.
there isn't a concrete reason, I don't do it just
Yeah.
for kicks. It's just me. But everybody's different, and I love the hype. I mean, I don't get me wrong. I
Yeah.
love the hype. That's why I kind of go into my 12-year-old shoes, because it is a big deal. The way that they have created this, it's just, it's amazing.
Yeah.
Amazing.
Yeah. I just realized I think I was talking to you looking at the screen, but not sharing my screen the last few minutes, but
That's okay. That's
whatever. Okay. Well, we'll see everyone next week. And thanks for joining us, and
Yeah, thanks for tuning in.
talk later. Bye.
Ciao.